My phone buzzed and I saw John's name on the screen. I didn't think anything of it at first. Maybe he was calling to ask about dinner or to check in. But when I answered, his voice was different. It was colder, almost distant, like he was talking to a stranger instead of his wife. "I'm leaving you," he said, and for a moment I couldn't even register what he meant. His tone was so flat, so final. It was like he had rehearsed it, like he was reading a script. No emotion, no hesitation, just the words coming at me like a cold slap. I don't even remember the exact moment it hit me, but it did. The shock was overwhelming, like I was drowning in it. My mind couldn't catch up. I kept replaying the words over and over in my head, trying to make sense of them. We'd been together for so long, we had a life together, a home together. How could this be happening? I thought about the little things, the laughter, the inside jokes, the moments of joy that had filled our days. And then, suddenly, those memories felt like a distant dream. The house we'd bought together, the one we'd poured so much into, was now just a reminder of everything I had lost. And yet, he spoke so casually, so indifferently. His words hit harder than I ever could have imagined. It wasn't just the fact that he was leaving. It was how little it seemed to matter to him. It wasn't even about me anymore. It felt like he was just reading a list of things he had to get through, and I was just part of the list. I opened my mouth, trying to speak, but the words wouldn't come. I wanted to ask him why, to plead for some kind of explanation, but before I could, he kept talking, almost as if he hadn't noticed the silence on the other end. "I'm moving in with her," he said, and my heart dropped. It wasn't even a question. It wasn't, "I'm seeing someone." It wasn't, "I've fallen out of love with you." It was just this casual announcement that hit like a freight train. Was Emily. The name fell from his lips so easily, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. The name stung in a way I can't even describe. The betrayal was sharp, but hearing her name was like pouring salt into a wound that was already bleeding. I'd suspected something for a while now, the late nights, the distance, but hearing him speak her name out loud as if I was the outsider, that was the moment I realized just how far gone we were. I had to bite my lip to keep the tears from spilling, but even then, I knew I had to hold it together. I couldn't let him see how much this was breaking me. I couldn't give him that satisfaction, but at that moment, I didn't know what to feel. Anger? Hurt? Betrayal? It was all there, swirling inside me, but I was paralyzed by the reality of it. It felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. What would you do in my shoes? How do you even begin to cope when the person you trusted most just walks away, as if your life together meant nothing? Let me know what you think. John and I had been together for over 8 years. 8 years of building a life together, of creating memories that I thought would last forever. We had bought our house a few years ago, a place we both fell in love with the moment we saw it. It was everything we'd ever wanted, a little slice of our future, something to grow into. I used to dream about filling those rooms with laughter, with family. It was supposed to be our forever home. But now, everything I thought was real seemed to unravel in front of me. The house, once a symbol of our commitment, felt like a lie. The walls that had witnessed our joy were now echoing with the silence of betrayal. What was once our dream had become a cold reminder of everything I had lost. When I look back, it's almost painful to realize how many signs I ignored. They were there, so obvious in hindsight, but I was too blinded by my love for him to see them. The late nights at the office, the strange phone calls, the way he seemed to withdraw more and more, like he was already mentally checking out. Every time I asked him what was going on, he'd smile and reassure me like nothing was wrong. But there was always a nagging feeling in the back of my mind, a voice that whispered that something wasn't right. I convinced myself that everything was fine, that it was just a phase. I kept waiting for him to come back to me, for him to remember what we had. But I was only fooling myself. I was a fool for trusting him when the signs were clear, for ignoring my gut and choosing to believe his empty reassurances. I thought I knew him, thought I understood him, but I didn't. Not really. I don't know why I thought things would get better. Maybe I believed in the future we'd talked about too much, or maybe I just didn't want to face the reality of what was happening. I told myself that he would come around, that we'd work things out like we always had, but as the days turned into weeks, I realized I had been holding on to a dream that no longer existed. When he left, it felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me. But even before that moment, I had been living in denial. I thought I was strong enough to handle the cracks that had started to form in our relationship. But now I saw them for what they really were. All those little things I'd brushed off, all those moments when I should have stood up for myself, those cracks had turned into a chasm. I can't believe I didn't see it sooner, but I guess that's how it works, doesn't it? You're in the middle of something, and it feels like it's fine, and then one day you look back and realize how far you've fallen. I trusted him, and now, that trust felt like a weight dragging me down. But in that moment, as painful as it was, I knew something had to change. John might have thought he had everything figured out. He thought he could walk away from me, that he could leave and live the life he wanted with someone else. But what he didn't know was that he wasn't in control anymore. I wasn't the same person who had been blind to his lies. I wasn't the woman who had begged for his love, or waited for him to come around. I was done being the fool, and this time I was going to fight for myself. After that call, I was a whirlwind of emotions: shock, hurt, disbelief. But beneath all of that, something else was starting to grow inside me. A spark of anger, the kind of anger that burns hot and steady. A deep, quiet resolve to not let him just walk away and leave me with nothing. He thought he had the upper hand, that he could take everything we had and run off with his new life, leaving me in the dust. But what he didn't know, what he had no idea about, was that the house he thought he sold wasn't even his to sell. That realization hit me like a cold wave, but also like the beginning of something powerful. He had no idea. He hadn't read the paperwork when we refinanced the house earlier that year. He had trusted me to handle everything, assumed I was taking care of it all, and he'd signed whatever I put in front of him without a second thought. What he didn't realize was that I had made sure the deed to our home had been transferred to my name months ago after we refinanced. It was my decision, and his carelessness had set him up for the worst kind of surprise. I knew I had to act, and I knew I wasn't going to sit around and let him destroy everything I'd worked so hard for. I wasn't going to cry or beg him to come back, that much was clear. But I couldn't let him just get away with it. This wasn't just about saving a marriage that was already dead. This was about taking back control of my life. This was about showing John that I wasn't the naive woman I used to be, the one who ignored the cracks and waited for him to make things right. I picked up the phone and called Chloe, my lawyer and one of my oldest friends. I needed her advice, and I needed it fast. When she picked up, I could hear the concern in her voice as soon as I told her what had happened. "You need to know something," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "John sold the house, without telling me. He says it's done. He says it's over." There was a pause on the other end of the line before Chloe responded, her tone sharp and clear. "Hold on," she said. "You're telling me he sold your house, without your consent?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Yes, that's what he says. Amelia," she continued, her voice laced with disbelief. "He can't just do that. The deed's in your name, isn't it?" I swallowed hard. "Yes, it is. He doesn't know. I made sure of it when we refinanced." There was a long pause, then Chloe let out a sharp laugh. "Well, well, well, that changes everything. He's in for a rude awakening." I felt the anger begin to turn into something else, something like empowerment. This wasn't just about protecting the house anymore. This was about standing up for myself, taking what was mine, and making sure he couldn't just waltz off into his new life with her and leave me empty-handed. "What do we do?" I asked, feeling the adrenaline rush through me. Chloe's voice was steady, confident. "First, we notify the buyer that the sale isn't legal. Once they know, they'll back out and the sale will be void. Then we draft a letter for John. We'll lay out the consequences of his actions, and if he tries to do anything else, we'll take him to court. He can't get away with this." I could feel the weight lift off my shoulders, just a little. For the first time since that phone call, I felt like I had some control over what was happening. Like maybe, just maybe, I could turn the tide. "Okay," I said, my voice steadier now. "Let's do it." That was the moment it all changed. The fight was on, but it wasn't about saving a marriage. That ship had already sailed. It was about reclaiming what was mine, my home, my peace, my dignity. It was about taking control of a situation I had no hand in creating, but had been forced into. John thought he was in control. He thought he could pull the rug out from under me, that I'd just accept it and move on, like he was the one who called the shots, but I wasn't that woman anymore. He'd made his choice. He'd chosen her, and he'd discarded me. But now, it was my turn to show him that I wouldn't be just some footnote in his story. I wasn't going to be forgotten. I wasn't going to be walked all over anymore. This was my fight now, and I was going to win. The next few days passed in a blur. My head was spinning with the realization that my life was changing, but it also felt like I was caught in this strange, surreal limbo. John's messages started flooding my phone, texts that ranged from desperate to manipulative, his voice coming through in frantic voicemails. Each message tried to pull at my heartstrings, to make me feel sorry for him, to make me believe that he was the victim in this story. He told me how much he regretted everything, how he'd made a mistake, how he wanted to fix things. But this time, I didn't feel the familiar twinge of guilt. I wasn't falling for it, not anymore. I'd carried the emotional weight of our marriage for years, his apathy, his lies, his disinterest, and now, for the first time, I could feel the weight lifting from my shoulders. His desperation didn't move me, it just made me more certain that I had made the right decision. I didn't owe him anything. He had already made his choice. He had walked away from me without a second thought, and now, he expected me to clean up the mess he'd left behind? No. I wouldn't be that person anymore. Every time I saw a new message from him, I felt a flicker of something, but it wasn't sympathy. It was more like irritation. How dare he try to guilt-trip me after everything he'd done? His promises to make things right were hollow. He couldn't fix what was broken because he was the one who had shattered it. I had spent years trying to patch things up, holding on to the hope that things would get better. But this wasn't just a bump in the road anymore. This was the end, and it had come crashing down hard. I didn't need him to fix anything. What I needed was to find peace, and that peace was going to come without him. The calls and texts kept coming, but I ignored them. Each time I picked up the phone, I could feel my resolve solidify even more. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me anymore. The man who had promised to stand by me, the one I had trusted with everything, had betrayed me. Now it was my turn to take control of my life. But I knew that this wouldn't be over until we had one final confrontation. John wasn't going to let go easily. He never did. I had a feeling his visit was coming. He'd come to collect his things, to make his final move. Sure enough, just a few days later, I saw his name on my phone again. My stomach dropped, but I wasn't afraid. The anxiety I used to feel whenever he walked through that door was gone. Now all I felt was calm. When I opened the door to him, there he was, John, standing there with that same arrogant air, like he was entitled to whatever was in that house, like he still had some claim over it. He stood there, a little too confident, looking around like everything was still his. But he didn't know what I had already done. He didn't know that the ground had shifted beneath him. "You're really going through with this, aren't you?" he asked, his voice dripping with that familiar, condescending tone. "You're not going to let this go?" I crossed my arms, meeting his gaze. There was no fear in me anymore, no hesitation. I'd lived with his manipulations for so long, and now it felt like I could finally breathe again. "No," I said firmly. "I'm not letting this go, not this time." John's expression faltered, but only for a moment. He tried to play it cool, but I could see the cracks starting to show. He wasn't used to this version of me, the one who didn't care about his pleas, the one who had stopped caring about his games. "Look," he began, stepping forward like he was about to launch into his usual speech about how he'd made a mistake and how we could fix things. But I cut him off before he could finish. "I don't want to hear it," I said, my voice steady, unwavering. "I've heard all of this before and I'm done listening to it." He looked taken aback, probably expecting me to be more emotional, to break down like I had in the past. But that woman, the woman who begged for him to stay, the one who cried herself to sleep wondering where he was gone. "You can't just take everything and leave," he said, his voice raising slightly like I was the one being unreasonable. "This is my house too, you can't just kick me out like this." I raised an eyebrow, unfazed. "Actually, John, I can. The deed's in my name. You signed the paperwork months ago. You didn't even read it. This house isn't yours anymore." "It never really was." His face drained of color as he processed what I was saying. The smugness he usually carried with him started to slip away, replaced by confusion and frustration. "Are you serious?" he asked, his voice low, barely above a whisper. "You can't be serious." I wasn't going to let him off the hook this time. "I'm very serious, John," I said, my voice cool and measured. "You think you can walk away from everything, like it doesn't matter to me? Like I'm just some obstacle in your way? Well, I'm not. I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you, at least not until you realize that this is over. You can take your things and go. Now." For a moment he stood there staring at me, probably trying to decide whether he could talk his way out of it or guilt me into changing my mind, but there was no more room for that, no more space for his games or his manipulation. I'm not playing your games anymore, John, I added, my voice hardening, and neither are you. He took a deep breath as if he was trying to steady himself, but I could see the defeat in his eyes. He had no leverage anymore. He couldn't control me, not this time. You think you've won? He muttered, his voice tinged with bitterness. This doesn't change anything. I smiled, not out of spite, but because I finally realized that it did. This was the moment I had been waiting for. It changes everything, I said, watching as his shoulders slumped. And you'll see that soon enough. With that he walked out, his footsteps heavy, as if the weight of everything he'd done was finally settling in. As I closed the door behind him, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I was done. And this time, it was for good. I knew this day would come. It was inevitable. John had been avoiding me for days, but it was only a matter of time before he showed up at the house. When he did, he wasn't alone. Of course he wasn't. He walked through the door, head held high, with Emily trailing behind him like they owned the place. He had that same arrogant swagger, the one he always wore when he thought he was in control, when he thought he was the one calling the shots. But as soon as they stepped inside, they both stopped dead in their tracks. The look on John's face when he saw me standing there, arms crossed, was priceless. He thought he had me cornered, like I was some helpless woman just waiting to be steamrolled. But what he didn't realize was that the power dynamics had shifted. This wasn't his house anymore. This wasn't his world anymore. It was mine. This is my home now, I said, my voice steady, clear. The words felt solid in my chest, like a declaration of war. John's eyes flashed with confusion at first and then anger. But I wasn't scared. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't afraid of his rage. I had faced his manipulation, his lies, for too long. Now I stood tall, unmoving, the woman who had stopped begging and started fighting. John's face twisted, his arrogance quickly morphing into fury. "What the hell are you talking about?" he barked. "This is our house. You can't just—" "I can," I interrupted, cutting him off before he could finish. "It's not our house, John. It's my house. The deed is in my name. You signed the papers months ago. You didn't read them, I did. And that's why you're not walking out of here with everything you think you deserve." Emily, who had been standing there awkwardly, her arms crossed tightly against her chest, finally spoke up, her voice laced with confusion. "Wait, what do you mean? John told me he sold the house. He said—" I turned my gaze to her, not with malice but with a calm assurance that this was no longer just about John and me. She needed to know the truth too. "He tried to sell it, but it's mine, Emily. He can't sell something that doesn't belong to him. You've been lied to, just like I was." Her eyes flickered between John and me, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. For a brief moment I could see the doubt forming in her expression, but she quickly tried to mask it. She didn't want to admit that she had been played too, but John was her problem now. I was done with him, and I was done being the one who had to carry the weight of his decisions. John, however, wasn't done. Not yet. His anger was palpable, filling the room like a thick fog. "You're going to regret this," he growled, stepping closer to me, like he thought he could intimidate me into backing down. "You really think you can just throw me out? After everything we've been through? After everything I've done for you?" I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I stood my ground, unwavering. "I don't owe you anything, John," I said, my voice sharp. "You've spent years treating me like I was nothing, like I was just someone to fill in the blanks when you couldn't find what you were looking for. You think you can just walk away, take everything you want, and leave me with nothing. But guess what? This time, the joke's on you." John's face turned red with frustration. He was so used to being the one who controlled the situation, the one who held all the cards. But now, he was the one scrambling. "You're blowing this all out of proportion," he said, trying to regain some semblance of control, but I could see the cracks in his facade. "You're making a huge mistake, Amelia. We can still work things out. We can fix this." I took a step forward, my voice low but firm. "No, John, there's nothing to fix. You made your choice. You've been making it for months, and now it's time to deal with the consequences. You can't just walk away from everything you've done to me and expect me to pretend like it didn't happen." His eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched as he tried to regain control. But I wasn't backing down. "Not this time. This is my home now," I repeated, emphasizing each word. "And I'm not going anywhere. But you need to leave. Now." Emily stood there, still trying to piece everything together. But I could see the shift in her. She wasn't as certain as she had been when she walked in. John's lies, his manipulations, they were all starting to come into focus for her too. She was starting to see him for what he really was. John noticed it too, his eyes flicking over to her. Don't listen to her, Emily. She's just bitter because things didn't go the way she wanted. She's trying to make me the bad guy, but you know the truth, don't you? I watched as Emily's expression faltered, as the doubt finally broke through her mask of confidence. She had believed in John, had trusted him the way I once had, but now the truth was out in the open, and she couldn't ignore it any longer. The look in her eyes said it all. She was questioning everything. Emily, John said, his voice more pleading now, but the desperation was clear. This isn't what it looks like. We can fix this. I can make it right. But even as he said it, I could see that she was pulling away, her arms uncrossing as she took a small step back. You lied to me, Emily whispered, her voice shaking. All this time, you lied. John's face went from anger to panic in the blink of an eye. His control over her, over both of us, was slipping fast. I watched as he tried to salvage the situation, but the damage was done. He was unraveling, and I was finally witnessing it firsthand. You don't get it, do you? I said, stepping forward once more. You don't control me anymore, John. Not with your lies, not with your manipulation. You've already destroyed everything, and now you're standing there pretending like you're still in charge. But you're not. You never were. The air between us was thick with tension, and I could see the fight draining out of him. I knew he was defeated, not physically but emotionally. He was seeing the reality of what he had done, and for the first time he couldn't talk his way out of it. Finally. Emily turned and walked out, leaving him standing there, staring after her in stunned silence. John didn't even try to stop her. He couldn't. This was the moment when everything came crashing down for him. It didn't look back at him. I didn't need to. I knew the battle was over, and I had won. The silence between us felt like a heavy weight as John stood there, visibly unraveling, while I stood firm, my arms crossed. The house that he thought he could just walk away from, was no longer a symbol of what we had built together. Now it was a battleground, a place where the truth was finally coming to light, and it was time for John to face the reality of what he had done. John, I think it's time we finally talk about everything, I said, my voice steady, calm, and controlled. There was no more fear, no more second-guessing. The rage, the hurt, the betrayal, they were all there, but they didn't control me anymore. I could see his face tighten, his shoulders stiffen. He knew what was coming. He had no choice but to listen now. His usual bravado was gone. All that remained was desperation, a man on the verge of losing everything. You tried to sell the house behind my back, I said, keeping my voice level. I could feel the satisfaction bubbling up inside me as the words left my mouth. He was cornered now. You thought you could just sell my house. Your name wasn't even on the deed, and you didn't even bother to read the papers you signed. You didn't even care enough to check. John's face flushed a deep red. His eyes darted around, searching for something, anything, to say. But the truth was already out. There was no denying it now. His silence spoke volumes, his guilt hanging in the air like an undeniable stench. I was the one who signed those papers, I continued, letting the weight of my words sink in. The deed was in my name the whole time, and you just signed away the future we supposedly built. And now you want to walk away from this like nothing happened? Like I don't matter? His mouth opened and closed like he was trying to form words, but nothing came out. Finally the words spilled out, but they were drenched in frustration and panic. This isn't fair, Amelia, he said, his voice rising, almost pleading. You can't just do this. I made a mistake. I was frustrated. I didn't think you'd ever find out. You thought I'd just sit back and let you steal everything? I interrupted. You thought I was just going to let you pull the rug out from under me like I wouldn't notice? Well, guess what, John? I noticed. I saw every little thing. I watched you manipulate me for years. I ignored it because I thought it was easier to live in denial, but not anymore. His hands were shaking now, his anger bubbling over, but I could see the fear behind his eyes. For the first time, he wasn't in control, and it was beautiful. I'm sorry, he stammered, his voice wavering. Please, you don't have to do this. We can fix this. We can work it out. I never meant to hurt you, Amelia. I swear I didn't. I couldn't help but laugh, not because it was funny, but because I was finally free of the guilt that had weighed me down for so long. I wasn't the one who needed to be fixed anymore. He was. You didn't mean to hurt me, I said, shaking my head. You've been hurting me for years, John. You've been emotionally absent, dishonest, and now this. But guess what? I'm done letting you pretend like everything's okay. I'm done being the one who cleans up your messes, who forgives your mistakes. You made your choices and now you're going to deal with the consequences. I watched his expression change from guilt to rage, the frustration and panic blending together. He took a step toward me, his fists clenched at his sides. "You think you've won, don't you?" He spat, his voice low and venomous. "You think you're the one who's in control now? But you're wrong. You don't get to just take everything from me, Amelia. You're going to regret this." But I wasn't afraid. I wasn't angry either. I felt nothing but calm satisfaction as I met his gaze. The power had shifted, and it wasn't in his hands anymore. The consequences he thought would never catch up with him had finally arrived. "You're wrong," I said, taking a step closer to him. "This isn't about winning, John. This is about taking back what's mine. You thought you could walk away with everything, that I'd just let you leave without facing the damage you've done. But I won't let that happen. I'm not the one who needs to regret anything." His shoulders slumped as he looked at me, his entire demeanor crumbling before my eyes. I could see the weight of what was happening hit him in that moment. He had no way out, he had no defense, and he knew it. "I've already contacted the buyer," I continued, my voice sharp and final. "The sale's void. You can't just sell what isn't yours. You've tried to destroy me, but this time, you're the one who's going to face the consequences." His anger flared, but it was weak now, futile. He took another step back, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "You're crazy, Amelia. This is all messed up. You don't even know what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing," I said. "You've spent so long making me feel small, but now it's your turn to feel the weight of your actions. This is the moment you realize that everything you've done has come back to bite you." For a brief second, I felt a flicker of something, satisfaction, relief, maybe even a little bit of vindication, but mostly I felt calm. For the first time in years, I wasn't caught in the storm of our marriage. I wasn't drowning in his lies, his manipulation. I was standing on solid ground, watching him unravel in front of me. "I'm done," I said, my voice low and unwavering. "You don't get to control me anymore. You don't get to take everything and walk away. I'm done being the one who suffers for your mistakes." He stared at me, breathing heavily, his face a mask of disbelief. Then, without another word, he turned and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. I let him go, because I knew that this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. John had spent so long running from his own lies, from the consequences of his actions, but now it was my turn to make him face them, and I would do whatever it took to make sure he did. The finalization of the divorce felt surreal. It had been a long time coming, but still, there was something about it, something that made the weight of it all feel almost impossible to fully process. I'd spent so many years drowning in John's lies, in his manipulations, in the constant emotional turmoil of trying to make something work that was never meant to be. But now, it was done. The divorce was final. The house was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I could breathe. The phone calls from John stopped coming. At first, there were moments when I'd catch myself glancing at my phone, half expecting to see his name pop up. But it never did. The silence was deafening at first, a quiet reminder of all the years he had controlled the narrative of our relationship. And then one day, I realized that I hadn't thought about it in hours, or maybe even days. I hadn't thought about what his next move would be, or whether he would try to come back. I had finally stopped waiting for him. I had moved on, and he had too. He had finally accepted that I wasn't going to give him another chance, that I wasn't going to let him back into my life, not after everything he had done. I stood in the living room, looking around at the space I had once shared with him, and for the first time in ages I felt a sense of peace. The house, once filled with painful memories, was now a reflection of me, of who I had become. The walls, which had witnessed so many arguments, so many broken promises, now felt like a home again. The scent of his cologne that used to linger in the air, the presence of his things scattered around, was all gone. In its place was a space that was mine, a space I had reclaimed. I had rebuilt my life piece by piece, and now I realized how far I had come. For so long I had been trying to fix something that was never meant to be fixed, but now I was whole again. I wasn't waiting for his approval or his affection. I wasn't waiting for him to show up and tell me everything would be okay. I had learned that I was the one who had to make things okay. I was the one who had to decide what my life would look like going forward, and I had done it, on my own. The weight of those years, the years spent doubting myself, questioning my worth, had lifted. It was as though the clouds had parted and for the first time the sun was shining through. I wasn't carrying the emotional baggage of my marriage anymore. I wasn't carrying the weight of John's careless decisions. I wasn't carrying the burden of being the only one fighting for a relationship that was doomed from the start. I didn't even feel anger toward him anymore. I didn't feel resentment. I didn't feel anything but a quiet sense of relief and maybe even a little bit of gratitude. Grateful that I had learned the hard way how strong I truly was. Grateful that I had been forced to stand up for myself, to see what I was truly capable of when I wasn't afraid to face the truth. Chloe had been with me every step of the way. She was the one who had helped me navigate through the legal process, the one who had offered advice when I didn't know what to do, the one who had supported me when I felt like giving up. So, when the papers were signed and everything was finalized, we made sure to celebrate. It wasn't about the divorce. It was about what it meant. It was about the future and the freedom that came with it. Chloe and I sat at a small cafe, laughing over glasses of wine as we toasted to the new chapter of my life. There were no more tears, no more doubts. There was only the knowledge that I was free. "For what it's worth," Chloe said, raising her glass, "I'm really proud of you, Amelia. You've been through so much, and you didn't just survive. You thrived. You're stronger than you know." I smiled, the weight of her words sinking in. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I had reclaimed my life. I had faced my fears, faced my past, and walked away from it stronger than I had ever been. "Thanks, Chloe," I said, my voice filled with gratitude. "I don't know if I could have done it without you." We clinked our glasses together, the sound of it ringing in my ears like a final, triumphant note. For the first time in years, I felt like I was the one who had the power. I wasn't defined by my past, by the marriage that had broken me, or by the man who had betrayed me. I was defined by the strength I had found within myself, by the courage to let go of what was no longer serving me, and by the determination to rebuild my life piece by piece. As we sat there talking about the future and all the possibilities ahead, I realized that I had learned the most important lesson of all, that I was enough, on my own. I didn't need anyone else to define my worth. I didn't need anyone to tell me who I was. I was me, and that was more than enough. Have you ever had to let go of someone you thought you'd never part with? The pain of walking away, the fear of starting over. It's overwhelming, isn't it? But you know what? It's worth it. Because when you finally let go of what's been holding you back, you make room for something better. Something that's just for you. How did you reclaim your strength when it felt like everything was falling apart? I'd love to hear your stories. Share your experiences in the comments. It's time to take control of your own life just like I did. Months have passed, and as I sit in the apartment that is now fully mine, I can't help but think about how much has changed. The echoes of my past no longer haunt me. The house is quiet now, no longer filled with the weight of old memories, no longer carrying the ghosts of everything that went wrong. It's just me here, no one else to share this space, but that's okay. For the first time in a long time, I'm okay with that. When I first moved into this apartment, it felt like a fresh start, a new chapter that I had to force myself to step into. I had been scared, unsure of what life would look like on the other side of the divorce. But now, I realize that this space isn't just a place to live, it's my sanctuary. It's mine because I fought for it, and every day I remind myself that I've built something stronger, something better, with my own hands. The divorce is behind me, the paperwork finalized, the legal battles, the emotional turmoil, the constant back and forth with John. It's all a distant memory. For the first time in years, I'm not living in the shadow of a broken marriage. I'm living in the light of a future I never thought was possible. I used to wake up with a heavy heart, unsure of what each day would bring. I used to doubt myself, thinking that maybe I wasn't enough or that I wasn't worthy of the life I dreamed of. I kept telling myself that I had to hold on, that I couldn't let go of everything we'd built together. But I'd learned the hard way that letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means making room for the life you truly deserve. John's betrayal cut deep. There's no denying that. It was a wound that took time to heal, a scar that would always be a reminder of the pain I had endured. But as time passed, I realized that his actions, as painful as they were, pushed me to become someone stronger, someone who could stand on her own 2 feet. His betrayal had been a catalyst for change, and though it hurt at the time, it was exactly what I needed to wake up and take control of my own life. I've stopped blaming myself for the things I could have done differently. I stopped wishing I had seen the signs earlier, because I know now that I couldn't have done anything differently. The truth is, I was doing my best in a situation that was never meant to work. It wasn't my fault that John chose to betray me. It wasn't my fault that he failed to see what we had together. That was his choice, not mine, and I've come to accept that. I've accepted that the past is just that, the past. I can't change it. I can't undo the hurt, but I can choose to move forward. And that's exactly what I'm doing. As I sit here looking out the window at the city lights twinkling in the distance, I realize that this is just the beginning. The weight of my old life, the weight of John's deceit and manipulation has been lifted. I'm free, and it's not just the kind of freedom that comes from escaping a bad situation. It's the kind of freedom that comes from realizing that I don't need anyone else to validate my worth. I am enough. I am worthy of love, of happiness, of peace. And I don't have to prove that to anyone, least of all to John. I used to think that surviving this experience would be the end of the road. I used to think that just getting through it would be enough. But now, I realize that I'm not just surviving, I'm thriving, and for the first time in a long time, I feel alive. I feel like I'm finally on the path I was always meant to be on, and it's on my terms. Every decision I make now is for me. Every step I take, every new opportunity that comes my way, is something I'm choosing for myself. I've started thinking about the future in a way I never did before. Where do I want to be in a year, in 5 years? What dreams did I put on hold, thinking they were selfish or unachievable? Now, I'm giving myself permission to pursue them. I'm giving myself permission to grow. I'm not looking back anymore. There are moments, of course, when the past comes rushing back, when I feel a wave of doubt or when I catch a glimpse of something that reminds me of what I lost. But instead of being paralyzed by those moments, I let them pass. I acknowledge them, feel the emotions, and then move forward. I'm not the same person I was when I first walked out of that marriage. I'm stronger, I'm more confident, I'm more aware of my own worth. The other day I was flipping through some old photos, ones I had kept tucked away in a drawer, and I came across a picture of John and me from years ago. We were smiling, arms around each other, looking so happy and in love. For a moment I felt that familiar pang of sadness. But then, I smiled. Not out of bitterness or regret, but because I knew that the woman in that photo wasn't me anymore. She was someone who didn't know her worth. She was someone who thought she needed another person to complete her. But I've learned that the only person I need to be complete is me. As I sit here now looking at the life I've created for myself, I can't help but feel a sense of pride. I've come so far, and I know that this is just the beginning. There's so much more ahead of me, so many opportunities, so many dreams waiting to be chased. And I'm ready. I'm ready for whatever comes next, because I know I'm capable of facing it head on. It is my time, my new beginning, and I can't wait to see where it takes me. Have you ever had to let go of someone you thought you'd never part with? Maybe it was a relationship that held you back, or a part of your past that weighed you down. How did you find the strength to reclaim your life? Share your experiences in the comments. Let's talk about how you moved forward, and how you're thriving, not just surviving. As I look forward to the new chapter in my life, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to let go of someone or something that was holding you back? How did you find the strength to move on and reclaim your life? Share your stories in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you've overcome your own challenges and found your path to freedom. And if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more about overcoming life's toughest battles, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Let's continue this journey together and inspire each other to thrive on our own terms.